All right, welcome to the channel. Um, let's a little bit more insight into the Eagles Jahan Dotson trade. I think a lot of people are, you know, if we were lined up against the Washington Commanders, and Jahan Dotson was on the Washington Commanders, he would be, people are arguing about them having one of the greatest receiving cores, and I think Jahan Dotson is still a great player. Now, whatever was happening in Washington, sometimes it happens. You know, I think another good point, I think it's funny how when he traded, now he wasn't no good. He wasn't fitting in and all that. And some of that may be true as far as him not fitting in. But one thing we know for sure and for certain is that he's a heck of a ball player. I mean, he had his best career game against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think it's just funny how you see fans and content creators, they immediately jump to, he's losing his job to this person, he's falling off. I think more of that had to do with maybe just not being able to acclimate to the regime and not being used in the right way. We've seen it even with players in Philadelphia, and they went on to other places and thrive because they weren't being used correctly here, or the coaching, the scheme just wasn't quite a good fit for them. One example could be, if you got a corner that plays predominantly zone, and you want to put him in man, and he gets routed up. Well, that's not his strength. So I think he's a perfect fit for the Philadelphia Eagles because, a complete route runner, great with the ball in his hands, quick in his speed, in and out of cuts. Did I say great hands? So somebody's trash is somebody else's treasure. Another thing, I think what I've seen from Washington Commanders fans is that they have been so disenfranchised with bad ownership for so long that they are so thirsty for a regime change, and they feel like this regime change right here is the one that's going to get it done because this guy that they brought in was from San Francisco, and they have a great roster. They haven't won anything, but they have a great roster. They haven't won anything in 25 plus years. They've been to a lot of Super Bowls, so I mean, if you can keep competing, that's a great thing. So they feel like this regime right here is the regime that's going to take them over the top, and they got to the point to where they're even guaranteeing it, and they're thinking that they're trusting this man, which is great. They're trusting this man. He got rid of Montez Sweat, which is a great player. And you talk about draft capital. Draft capital is only as good as the players that you get. Now, the verdict is still out on the players that they drafted with the new regime. You don't know how that's going to turn out yet. So we have to wait on that. But one thing I do know is Montez Sweat is a dog, right? Maybe they didn't want to pay him. Chase Young, that's up in the air. A lot of people call him a bust. I think that, he's not as good as he had, we thought he would be. And we'll get to see how good he really is, with the new team. I think he went to the best possible situation in San Francisco. They went to the Super Bowl. They probably were going to go there with or without him, but he got to the Super Bowl, right? So we'll see how he ends up in New Orleans. Now, Jahan Dotson is moved to the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, I always thought the world of him. I hated going against him. I thought he was smaller, but, and anytime he played us, he had good games. So that's all I can, look at. Now, sometimes in football, culture, and when things change, just like a job, right? I would really like to know what happened in Washington because I really don't know. But if I had to guess, and that whose fault is it, I should say? Is it the coaching regime's fault or the player's fault if he can't fit into the system? Leave a comment. To me, I think it's a little bit of both. I put a little bit more onus on the coach because if you're a veteran coach, you should be able to make this player fit within your offense, right? Meaning Cliff Kingsbury. You should be able to make this player fit within your offense. And if you can't, then, I think that's an indictment on you. Now, maybe they're, clearing out room to make a trade to bring somebody else in, and maybe they feel very confident about the triplets or the four receivers they got. They got a lot. Olamide Zaccheaus played in Philadelphia. He's a solid guy, but he's not Jahan Dotson, right? He's a solid receiver. He's going to do what he needs to do. He's going to catch the ball, but he's not a superstar. So, and the other part about this is that the Commanders have went through a lot of regime changes. I mean, the same owner, but different management groups, different GMs, a lot. If you look over the last, 10 to 15 years, and it just didn't happen for them, right? So they feel like this guy's making all the right moves, and he may be. But all I'm saying is, let's wait and see. Because, in my opinion, if I'm looking at the Commanders, if I was a Commanders fan, I'm saying, all right, look, we investing for the future. We trying to flip this Jahan Dotson into maybe a third-round receiver next year that can play alongside Terry, right? Or a cornerback, or a tackle, a left tackle, right tackle, center, anything. And maybe they understand, look, the Eagles going to beat our ass this year anyway. Not that we're not going to compete. The Cowboys probably going to work on us. We might split with the Giants. Maybe we split with the Cowboys and the Eagles, but what are the likelihood of us actually going to being a playoff competing team? Maybe it's slim to none. Maybe they're going to go through their growing pains. And this is if I'm a Commanders fan. So now we're continuing to build draft capital, build draft capital, build draft capital. Maybe that's, and maybe he got the word from the ownership that he's going to have 5+ years. Because we know in the NFL is win now. It's win now at all costs. And if it was win now, know what it would look like if it was win now for Commanders? It would look like getting Brandon Ayuk. Maybe making a few different, going after a few, bigger, maybe like a Brian Burns. I mean, it's a lot of money that has to go out. I get it. But maybe going after, key pieces on the offense to say, all right, if we get Brandon Ayuk in there, we should score 30 a game. And maybe we just lean on the offense and our defense can be solid because Quinn is a defensive-minded coach. Maybe it's that. Or, which I think is the latter, is they're going to build slowly and maybe not this year. Maybe next year they make that playoff push and then next year it's like, all right, we all in. Maybe that's the case. That's how I see it. Not to say that they can't win 8 or 9 games. They could definitely win 8 or 9 games. I don't think it's likely looking at the schedule. I say 5 to 6 wins. 7, I think, would be great for a rookie quarterback. But that's just what I see with the situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. If the ownership is going to give Adam Peters time to build this roster, if he says, look, I might need 3 or 4 years to turn this thing around to a playoff contender, Super Bowl contender, whatever. Let me start here. I'm going to flip all the players. They get all the worth we can from them and flip them out of here. Because if Jahan Dotson, and maybe you like, shit, I don't care what the Eagles do. They're going to kick our ass anyway. Let Jahan go over there. Let him route us up. Let him catch a game winner on us. And in the future, we'll deal with it. So that's another thing. Why in the hell do you trade him to a division rival unless one or two things, you don't care about how he's going to destroy you. 2, you don't think he's going to destroy you. Those things are all up in the air. Now, if you had to ask me, I think he's a hell of a player still. And I was surprised. I saw the rumors last week. I'm like, nah, there's no way he's coming to the Eagles. They're not going to trade him to the Eagles. Anybody but the Eagles. So we can't, in closing, we can't just assume, and this is with any regime, but with Washington, that the decisions that they make are going to pan out and are great decisions. We can't just assume that. Because all of a sudden now, he wasn't, and real people, I think I saw the few, like, real content creators, they were like, they scared of this. They know that he's going to be routing them up. They understand he's going to be having blood in his eyes when he plays Washington. Other people are like, he wasn't that good anyway. He underachieved the last 2 years. He wasn't, his head was down, his body language, De'Ami Brown was outplaying him. All this shit people are saying. But, the greatest thing about this is you get a chance to prove it in 2 weeks. You get a chance to prove whether or not you are a bust, you're sorry, you had no morale. But the last thing, I said that was the last. The last thing is sometimes culture. When people come in and they see the culture is different somewhere, and winning is actually expected, and you're not in a rebuild, then it might. You got AJ Brown over there, Smitty, Saquon, the Eagles fan base, the Eagles culture, Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl aspirations. It's like, shit, if I do my part, we can win this thing. And that's what I see happening with Jahan Dotson. Yeah. So let me know what you think in the comment section about what I said, man. Peace.